Good evening, everybody. Good morning, good night, whatever it is, wherever you are watching this. I hope that you're having the day that you're meant to have. Whether that be great, whether that be terrible, whether that be undecided, indifferent. No, I'm just kidding about having a bad day. Nobody should be having to have a bad day, but it is a part of life, so we can't act like it doesn't happen. Anyways, welcome to my channel. Welcome to the topic of the night. Everything that I do, I try to do research on and make it as factual as possible, where I don't have to ask a lot of questions about who, why, when, where, and things of that nature. I leave those questions up to you. I give you the information, and hopefully, you can find the answers that you're seeking. Um, all of it is research based, um, and I hope that you enjoy watching my content. If you do, just hit the like button. And if you want to hear more, hit the subscribe button. And I'll try to keep doing these and making them as entertaining as possible because I have learned through other people's mistakes that oftentimes, people get really fixated on themselves rather than the material. So let's get going and talk a little bit tonight. It's Friday night. Hope you guys are doing something exciting other than watching YouTube. If you are, it's much appreciated that you're watching YouTube because, you can watch the latest commentary on the Idaho 4 case. I've been thinking and researching about the 400 witnesses that was stated in the courtroom probably about 2 weeks ago. When the defense attorney stated that she still had 400 witnesses to interview, and that it's difficult to interview these 400 people because the media has already sifted through most of them and they're not wanting to talk, they're not wanting to divulge any new information to anybody. So it would be difficult for the defense to be able to talk to these individuals. So when it comes to discussing information with people, you have to understand that the most important thing is to build rapport. It's kind of like on here. If you can't build a rapport with people, then you can't connect with them, you can't get them to understand your point, and you talk in circles, then you're not going to be very successful in presenting your information. First of all, let's talk about the difference between an interview and an interrogation because I've spoke on this on some other videos, but I'd like to share it again. An interview is when you arrive to a crime scene and you do what's necessary in order to decipher who's, what, when, and where. Who saw it, what happened, when did it occur, and where did it occur. So let's say um, one of the thesis essays that I've had to write recently is about a scenario. So I gave a scenario about a lady facing domestic violence, and she lived with her live-in boyfriend, and he ended up dead. So the police arrive, and they start interviewing the neighbors. The first neighbor tells them at about 5:45 he let his dog out to urinate, and he heard yelling coming from one of the next door neighbor's apartment. He states he heard yelling, cussing, and some loud movement and threats. He said since he'd heard this stuff before, he thought nothing of it, so he just kept on going about his way. He comes back around 5:45, 6 o'clock, and he notices that the shouting, the screaming, the cussing, all of that has subsided. So he goes into his apartment and he doesn't think anything of it. Then the police continue to look at the footage, look at the information, the crime scene, and they find another witness. This witness was going to work. This witness states that in between 5:45 and 6 o'clock, he heard a loud pop, which sounded like a gun. He said he noticed that there was loud yelling and cussing and throwing things, and he heard a loud pop. He said he thought it might have just been a car backfiring, since it didn't really sound like a gunshot. He went fast to his car. Excuse me. He went fast to his car, got in his vehicle, and took off. So that was two witnesses interviewed, okay? Then they interviewed the lady who lived at the apartment. They interviewed her, and she was very vague. She gave vague answers. And since usually whenever somebody is murdered, they look at the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the circle that's immediate around that person. So they interviewed her, and the detective said, well, I'll get back in touch with you. So they cornered it off, let the teams of investigative people come in and start doing what they do: fingerprinting, looking for DNA, blood, all the above. So they go down and they start reviewing the interview notes, okay, because that's usually what they do. They jot down notes. And they start to notice some inconsistencies in what the lady said. She basically stated that she was asleep during 5:30 to 6, and that they had stopped arguing probably about 5 o'clock. So this goes against what the other two witnesses heard. So the detectives get together and they start mounting questions to go a little deeper. So it's not an interview when they ask her to come in. Now it's an interrogation. And the interrogation tactic can be very aggressive. It can be very volatile. You can have good cop, bad cop. You can even tell the potential suspect things that are not even true, things that you might have that you don't. And that's not against the law. That is investigative tactics that have been used for generations. So they call her in, they start asking all these questions. They finally break her down, and she admits. She admits that they were having an argument over money. She admits that she wasn't going to be a victim anymore to his domestic violence, and she shot him. So there there's a very simplistic understanding of interview versus interrogation. Because I believe that many people get those two confused. They really don't understand how it works as far as, well, everybody that you talk to, you must interrogate. No, that's not how it works. There's some people that you can just ask simple questions and delete them out of the process of elimination. So let's take this to the Idaho 4, okay? When the police finally arrived at 11:58, 11:59, and there was a group of students out in front of the house, and as the police officer approached, one of them very silently muttered the word dead. Well, the police officer instincts first came to to respond to an unconscious person. So I'm sure he was confused at that muttered word dead. And he approached the house, went inside, smelled blood, and then saw the scene. At that point, his main focus is to contain the crime scene, meaning that if there's anybody in the house, he needs to tell them to stay outside and not leave. He needs to call for support if it's too big for him. He's to call for additional backup. And as you noticed, they supposedly told DMS to stand down because there's nothing that they could do, supposedly. So once the initial people went into the house, they started locking it down, like making sure people weren't tramping through the scene, they weren't touching anything like this. I'm sure they didn't have a clue what went on. You arrive, you see a crowd outside, you walk in, there's these students that have been murdered. You haven't seen this in 7 years, so maybe you weren't even on the force then. So if I'm wrong, if this officer was on the force, I mean, I'm not taking this verbatim for what is being stated in the PCA. I'm kind of going on memory, and it might be a little fuzzy, because I haven't read the PCA in a while. But anyways, you secure the crime scene, you call for backup, you do all these things, and then you start making sure that evidence is not destroyed, contaminated, or even taken out of the crime scene. So I'm sure at this point, other officers arrive, they start cornering people off, getting them away from each other, and they start interviewing them. Starting probably with the person who called 911. Because whatever was on that 911 call, that was probably the most evidence that they had about what the individual saw as soon as he entered the house. He or she, whoever it was, we, we, we've read that it was a he, but, we could be wrong. So, anyways, they start interviewing these people. They start taking notes. They take their name, social, what, where they go to, did they go to school there? How did they know the victims? Blah, blah, blah. On and on and on. What did they see? How long had they been there? Did they hear anything before that? Did they hear anything the night before? Did they know anything? And since there is a gag order, you'd be surprised if there isn't going to be some individuals that do have some knowledge about what happened, about things that they seen, they heard, or they mistook for being just a rowdy Saturday night, early Sunday morning. And as you notice, they didn't take anybody down to interrogate them that first day, because usually when you interrogate somebody, the individual is probably still at the crime scene who committed the crime. So you interview him, you decide, hey, this is the perp. Let's take him down to the crime scene, or let's take him down to the station. Let's interrogate him some more, because he's really not giving us all that we need. So they gathered as much information with the investigative team that they had at that house. The coroner showed up about 4 o'clock, 4:30, 4:45, somewhere around there. She went through, she investigated, did what she needed to do, make notes, looked at the stab wounds, the cuts, the tears, whatever it was. So I'm pretty certain that the primary suspects were initially the people closest to the victim. So that would have been Dylan, that would have been Bethany, that would have been Jack D, that would have been Adam, and it would have been Jack Showalter, because he was the last one to supposedly see them. And I'm sure initially they didn't know about the ride share driver. They didn't know about the DoorDash driver. And they probably were looking to interview these people and then possibly interrogate them if their words and their actions did not match up to what they say they heard, they saw. I have read where Dylan was interrogated by like 3 law enforcement agencies, obviously. I don't know about Bethany, but I'm sure they were interrogated. So, as I just told you, an interview is very different than an interrogation. So, she was interrogated. That means that they pulled out the big guns. They gave her the story. They gave her the mess. They're not playing. They're trying to catch somebody. And this is probably one of those times she gave her recollection that ended up in the PCA. And it may not have been verbatim. They may have gotten pieces of that story each time they interviewed her by a different agency, because when you're in a traumatic state, you're not going to remember everything. You wake up, your friends are dead. There's cops everywhere. They're wanting you to come here, come there. Let me fingerprint you. Let me take your DNA. Let me do this. Let me do that. And that's another thing. If there was no DNA found on the scene other than on the button snap, wouldn't there have been Dylan's DNA in the crime scene area if they would have been involved? Bethany, they lived in the house, so it's hard to really differentiate whether it would have been friendly DNA or just suspicious DNA. But I'm sure the police did their due diligence to find out exactly what they wanted. We'll get back to this. Let me get back to this that I want to show you and talk about, and then we'll get back to what I was just saying. Okay, it says police investigators agree that eyewitnesses usually provide central lead to their investigations. Police lament, however, that witnesses rarely provide sufficient information. How might police improve the quality and quantity of evidence elicited from eyewitnesses? Unfortunately, police cannot control the viewing conditions or the quality of the witness's memory. Of the various factors that police can control, the most productive approach is to concentrate on how they interview witnesses. Okay, so let's go down to current police interviewing practices. Okay, although the police interview is a central element in eliciting complete, detailed, accurate witnesses report, the police are not very proficient interviewing cooperative witnesses. 2 decades ago, Fisher, 1987, and George and Clifford, 1992, described typical interviewing protocols used by the American and British police, respectively, and to say the least, the results were discouraging. Following a perfunctory effort to establish rapport, police investigators generally begin interviews by making an open ended request to the witness. Tell me what happened. After listening to initial outbursts of crime related facts, often no more than just a few seconds, the interviewer interrupted the witness' narrative response and conducted the remainder of the interview as a series of direct, short answered questions. How tall was he? How much did he weigh? Frequently, interspersed among these questions were leading or suggestive questions, such as, was he wearing a red shirt? Unfortunately, little apparent progress had been made in the past 2 decades as similar patterns of poor interviewing procedures. So, that statement, 5'10" or taller, not very muscular, but athletic build, clad in black. Does that sound like a policeman's description, or does that sound like a 19, or I guess she's 19, 20-year-old person who had just seen her best friends murdered? So it could have been something like this. So when you saw that individual on the third time, was he wearing all black? Was he clad in black? Yes, he was clad in black. How tall was he? Well, I'm like 5'10", so probably he was around my size or bigger, maybe 6 foot or more. Was he muscular? Was he athletic build? He wasn't very muscular, but he was kind of athletic. What else do you remember about him? What stuck out the most? His bushy eyebrows. Really? How could you see those bushy eyebrows? Because he was wearing a mask that covered his nose and his mouth. And I'm sure it went on more. What color hair did he have? Was it straight? Was it curly? Was it short? Was it long? Did you notice any tattoos? Did you notice any facial piercing? Did you notice any ear piercing? Did you notice anything abnormal? Any scars on his face? Did he, did he walk with a limp? Did he, was his stride short, small? All these questions that obviously didn't make the PCA that people forget that goes into an interview. You know what I mean? An interrogation would be like, I know you saw what color his hair was. You told me you didn't see it, but I know you saw it. What was it? Was it curly? Was it brown? Was it black? Come on, tell me. What color was it? We know you saw it. But it gets a lot more forceful. So, as this says, there's a lot of questions that are suggestive. A lot of suggestive questions. The interviewer has a predetermined set of topics or questions to guide the interview. The interviewer asks a specific question about each of the items in the predetermined set. The interviewer generally controls the flow of the information and does much of the talking and thinking, therefore relegating the witness to playing a passive role, namely to answer the interviewer's question. So it's human nature to suggest certain things. And before you guys get into that mindset that this was a conspiracy to set up Dylan or to get Koberger or whatever, there's a lot of people that have been caught with this theory in mind, these questions, these set of rules and guidelines. To the naked eye and to somebody in the true crime family or true crime community, as y'all say, it would look like somebody was trying to get somebody set up, but it's not. Psychologically, there have been a lot of tests done on how people respond to stress, how people respond to directiveness, how people respond to voice transmission, nonverbal cues, such as things like this. So to sit there and say, well, that interviewer planted words in her mouth, or that interviewer planted words in so and so's statement, you don't know that. It may have been nothing more than just two people having a conversation. Maybe she was crying. Maybe she was upset, which I'm pretty sure she was, and everybody else who they interviewed, because I'm sure she wasn't the only one. Ann Taylor said 400. So there's 400 witnesses, meaning that there's 400 people that know about this. And in detail, they have something to share. They either saw, heard it planned, whatever. 400 people. 400 people that could tell you about Bethany. 400 people that could tell you about Dylan, could tell you about Xana, Ethan, Maddie, Kaylee, Brian, or anybody else involved in that little circle. That so many different investigative interviews follow the same pattern suggests that the pattern is intuitive and in some sense natural. Another possible explanation is that either all institutions provide the same kind of training, which seems unlikely, or institutions provide minimal training, and so interviewers resort to their natural intuition, meaning that if I feel that this person is lying, I'm going to stick to those very specific questions, not open ended, yes, no questions. I'm going to stick to, you're going to give me something. You're going to give me some meat to, or some teeth into this information. The problem with such intuitively guided natural interviews is that they are ineffective. They elicit less information than is potentially available, and they sometimes entice witnesses to provide incorrect descriptions. Improving the quality of interviews, then we will require something more than an intuitive approach. We describe here other approaches to interviewing that are less intuitive but more scientifically based, and which, most importantly, elicit more witness information without distorting the witness's memory. See, as a counselor and therapist, I use motivational interviewing, but I'm not interviewing somebody after a crime scene. Motivational interviewing is meeting the client where they're at rather than where you want them to be. So if somebody's saying, I'm really sad right now, you stay on the I'm really sad right now instead of going back and referring to when was the last time you were happy. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of your positive traits. Well, that's not what the person is at the moment, so you're not going to get much. The cognitive interview. The following is a thumbnail sketch of a CI for a complete description, blah, blah, blah. Let's go with the social dynamics. The success of police interviews reflects in part how well the witness and interviewer interact with each other. Ideally, the interviewer must gain the witness's trust as someone who is concerned about the personal welfare of the witness and not seen only as an evidence gatherer. Second, the interviewer must convince the witness to generate a rich alternative narrative description of the critical event and not merely provide brief answers to the interviewer's questions. As I told you all ago, you must develop rapport. Witnesses and especially victims are often asked to give detailed descriptions of intimate personal experience to police officers who are complete strangers. Police interviewers should invest time on the onset of the interview to develop meaningful personal rapport with the witness. A feature often absent in police interviews, establishing rapport entails exploring links that bind the interviewer and the witness at a personal level. Shared values, experiences, and emotions, and especially those related to the critical event. You know, I'm pretty certain that the females were interviewed with female detectives that were probably younger than the older detectives that were on the force or whatever, because they could have more rapport. Like you would think, well, this person's almost my age, so they'll understand the slang I may talk. They'll understand the short range of sentences that I may say, the incomplete sentence structure, this or that. They'll understand it. So I can be myself because that's what you want. You want somebody to be comfortable in being who they are. You don't want somebody to be feeling like they have to change who they are or their comfort level in order to give you information about something tragic. I'm going to continue this weekend with this series and we're going to continue to talk about it. If you'd like to hear more about it, please tune in. Hopefully, I'll get enough subscribers that eventually we can go live and I can take your questions and we can talk about things together in a proactive, positive, insight filled way rather than focusing on other people who are on this platform and what they do and what they don't do and how they do it and who was first with the drop. Because in reality, people that don't like to do the work, they're going to steal other people's stuff. And that should tell you a lot about who they are as a person. So if you see one person drop information and then one of the people that they know piggybacks on that information and then another person piggybacks on that information, or they all get together and they talk about the information and then they're still talking about it 3 days later, or somebody else is, well, let's rehash this. That tells you that they really do not invest their time and energy in really understanding what they're talking about. I'm not an expert at everything, but I know a lot of things. And I don't know them because I learned them on YouTube, because I learned them on Google, because I learned them by other means of hearsay or anything like that. I've learned them through going to school, on the job training, internships, and things of that nature where they teach you the correct way to do things, where you don't take shortcuts, where you don't use loopholes to say, well, I'm an investigator now because I can ask good questions. No, you're not an investigator. That's not how it works. When you're investigating the whole crime. You're not just investigating that one piece of evidence that people still get fixated on. Since they talked about the button snap on the PCA, since they talked about the cam or the cast information, they talked about the white elantra. So those three things people fixate themselves on. Not that it's a bad thing or that I'm judging. I'm just stating that think about some of the questions I just asked tonight, how those avenues went in the piece in the gag order. Were those individuals implemented in a lot of other areas? Just because they clear you does not mean that they still don't have you on their radar for suspicion. I hope you heard that. Just because they clear you does not mean that they still don't have notes that they can say, you know what, this is really weird. This doesn't make sense, or this doesn't add up, or somebody forgot to cross reference what they got from you. So, all these one and done type people, you need to kind of relax a little bit. You're going to give yourself health problems over something that has nothing to do with you. And I might not be very popular saying that, but you know what? In reality, enjoy the true crime, enjoy the streams, enjoy the information, but by no means does it equal you getting educated in a very structural way where you can actually speak on something rather than just belt out something that you heard somebody else say and then you end it with, I don't know. That's no accountability right there. None. No accountability whatsoever. So Be sure to take care of yourselves and don't let this be more than you. I enjoy doing it. That's why I'm on here. Like I said in one of my videos that nobody watches, I'm a talker. I need to talk. I'm used to talking 3 hours at a time. And I don't get to talk 3 hours at a time in my current position. So, therefore, this helps me get my thoughts out. It helps my brain clear itself so that I can relax. I'm very analytical. So, try to remember when you're watching things or you're hearing things, don't take it at face value just because you heard it the first time, the second time, or the third time. Do your own research and understand it for yourself. That way, if it keeps being spoken on, you'll understand whether it's reality, whether it's real, whether it's not. And then you can make up your choice whether you choose to listen to these people or you choose to walk away and say, well, they're nice people. They appear to be nice people. So, I wish them the best. But they're not very good at what they do as far as investigating or delegating information because anybody can dig up trash on anybody, especially these days on the internet. But once you put that trash together and you can tell a story that is not speculation or corruption or lack of detail, and you can tell it in an intellectual manner that leads to results and solution, then you actually are part of the solution and not part of the problem. I hope you understood all that. Like I said, I'm long-winded, so I'm trying to cut these off around the 30-minute time frame. If you've liked or subscribed to me in the last month or two, I deeply appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for all the things that you've given me in this short time that I've been doing this. I'm thankful that you listen to the message and not necessarily just focus on me because I'm just the messenger, not the message. I'm here to give insight, hope, and a little love whenever you need that pick me up to let you know that you're not alone. But that's on my other channel, not my other channel, but my other topics. And I'll be doing these alternating videos probably till I decide to hang it up. If you have anybody that's struggling with substance abuse or any kind of behaviors due to substance abuse, any teen that is struggling, I would suggest that you find some kind of outlet to assist yourself because you can't do it alone. Get them some help if they're willing to go to help. If not, then you must protect yourself with some boundaries. And if it is a dire emergency, please dial 911 and get your loved one what they need. Till next time, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, night. Time to go eat some cereal. Any Lucky Charm people in here? All right, peace out.